Gung Ho was released in 1986. It stars Michael Keaton, Gedde, Watanabe, and Mimi Rogers, and it is directed by Ron Howard. Now, I saw this film when I was about 8 years old, I think. Saw it with my family, and I remember laughing my ass off. I thought it was incredibly funny. I remember my brothers laughing. We had a blast watching this as children. It's about this man played by Michael Keaton, who, on behalf of his failing town, goes to Japan to try and convince a Japanese car company to come over to their town and reopen a closed down car making factory so that they can get their town back up and running. They come over, but as a result, they bring their own team as well, and the rivalries ensue basically. So you've got these Japanese people kind of running the factory with the American town workers working it, but having very different ideas about how to go about running things and doing things. You've got the Japanese efficiency, the ethics, the work ethics, in which you devote your life to your work, and then you've got the American kind of it'll get done when it gets done. We're great at what we do. We're great at everything, this, that, and the other. And it's just about those two different cultures colliding. Now, as I say, I'd remembered really loving this as a kid, thinking it was hilarious. I've only just now gotten around to rewatching it. It was one of those movies that I'd always wanted to revisit, but was always a bit nervous about because it has a pretty low score on various film sites. If you look on Letterboxd, it's got a 2.9. So I always felt like it's going to be one of those films in it where when I revisit it, it's not going to be quite as good as I remember, and I'm going to be a bit disappointed. Now, I can say, having revisited it now, that is not the case. And that 2.9 score on Letterboxd, as far as I'm concerned, can suck it. I loved this film. I thought it was really great. It's just a really good character-driven movie that's also got quite a lot to say about the two different cultures. Now, does it have a few elements in it where you're like, yeah, that's a little bit kind of stereotypical? Yeah, it does. There's a lot of Japanese stereotypes, but you could just as easily say that about some of the things with the American characters, the fact that they are very gung ho, the fact that they are, we're the best in the world, we're, this, that, and the other. So, but I think what it does is it's very relevant, I would say. I think it's one of those films where you watch it now and you feel like, aside from a few of those Japanese stereotypes, it does feel very relevant. It feels very much like it's speaking to today's generation. You think a lot about how America is perceived today and some truths that perhaps it is unwilling to acknowledge about itself as a country, as a nation. And I think this film does a very good job of acknowledging them and challenging the Western attitude about how they conduct themselves in the world and with other people and other cultures and what they feel they can learn from others. And I got a lot from it, I'll say that. And I do think it's funny, and even those stereotypes. Yes, the stereotypes. Yes, we're supposed to be all, yes, I don't go on board for all that anymore because we live in this, culture in which we've gotten past that. Stereotypes are there, man, because there's some truth in them. That's how they come about, And as someone who's been to Japan, who has encountered former businessmen living on the streets in Japan because of a lot of the mentality that we see with some of the businessmen in this film, where they make business the be-all and end-all, and if they fail, they're kind of cast out, and they even cast themselves out, they blame themselves. it's a very heavy burden, is business in Japan. They take it very seriously. Now, I don't know how much of that has changed since this film was released, or certainly since I went to Japan in 2003, but I certainly saw the effects of that mentality amongst some of the homeless in Japan. So stereotypes exist for a reason. You know, they are born out of truth, I think. There are some here that maybe play it up a bit too much for laughs, but I find them funny. So, you know, for a comedy, it does the job. Michael Keaton is really great in this. Michael Keaton tends to be pretty great in most things, to be honest, but I really like what he's playing here. He's that everyman. He's someone that you feel like you could trust, that you could get behind, but he does have a roguish quality about him as well. There are times in the film where he puts himself first rather than the people he's supposed to be representing, and you never hate him for it. And that's because of the warmth of Keaton in the role. What he's able to do with that, how he's doing stuff that's kind of roguish and that you shouldn't be on board with and you're not on board with, and yet you still kind of like him as a character. That's, again, as I say, that's down to Keaton. Watanabe as well, Gedde Watanabe, he's really great in this. He's quite funny. There's a scene in the film when we're first introduced to him when he's kind of being punished by his bosses because he's failed at one of his business ventures, and they're kind of shouting and berating him, and it's amusing to watch. It's quite sad as well. It's quite tragic, but it is funny. A lot of that comes from Watanabe's performance, but he really humanizes this character as the film progresses. So he doesn't just become this caricature kind of larger than life Japanese stereotype. There's a scene like 2/3 of the way into the film when Keaton and his character both get a little bit drunk and they start laying their cards on the table, they start talking and they laugh at each other, and they become a bit more human towards one another, and start to see each other as people rather than just obstacles. And it's a really great scene, not just from the way it's written and the way that it brings out both of their different characters, but just for the actors and how they get to play it. It really opens the floor up for those two to kind of bounce off of each other, and it's a joy to watch. I also think Mimi Rogers in this is pretty good as well. She doesn't get too much to do, but she is there to show some of the attitudes, I think, towards women in business, particularly from the Japanese standpoint, but the way in which Keaton's character plays into that and the way he treats her as a result. I think they write it and Howard directs it and Mimi Rogers plays it in such a way that she never loses her strength as a result. Despite the way they treat her, she always keeps her dignity. You know, there's the scene where she walks out of this meeting. She wants to be a part of it, and she gets mistreated by Keaton's character, and she walks out, and it's almost like a up yours. And later she comes out with some profanity towards him, and as she keeps her strength, she keeps her dignity in that situation, and she walks away from him, and whether or not that relationship resolves, I will leave you to find out if you go and watch the film. But again, like I say, I think Rogers plays the character with strength and dignity, and it makes for a strong female character in a time when perhaps you didn't get quite as many as you do today. Yes, some bits of it have dated, again, because of the whole stereotype things. But as far as the film goes, as far as a viewing experience goes, I felt like this film held up. It's got pretty well drawn out characters, it's pretty well directed, and it's pretty funny. And I will watch it again. I have no doubt. I'm quite shocked it took me this long to get around to rewatching it, to be honest. I'm going to give Gung Ho a 4 out of 5. I highly recommend it. Do check it out. If you have seen it, please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video, and until next time, crack in.